Come January, come February, we're usually getting a little itchy trying to get away from this cold weather, so we decided to go to the Western Caribbean on a cruise with our friends Helmut and Inge. And so we flew down to Tampa via Southwest Airlines. Now the Southwest Airlines have a rather unusual boarding system. You will see a picture of these funny looking pillars with a series of numbers on them. And when you get your boarding pass, it contains a big letter and a smaller number. And the letter designates your group, and the number represents your position. Now when you get to the gate, and the time comes for boarding, your group will be called, and then you must line up within the numbers on the pillars that match the numbers on your boarding pass. And when you board the aircraft, you can pick any one of the available seats. And while you're doing that, the next group is being called up and so on. It's a pretty interesting system. It works very well, even though it's a bit strange. And when we arrived in Tampa, we arrived a day early before the embarkation, just to be on the safe side, and we stayed at the DoubleTree Hotel and spent the night. Around noon, our friends Helmut and Inge arrived on the following day from Sarasota. We had planned to do the cruise together, and we drive to the airport and park the car in the parking garage and go through the boarding procedure, filling out all the sort of forms that they ask you to fill out. And we can see our luggage being loaded into the ship. And while we walk along the gangway, we're told by a member of the crew to hold out our hands so that he can spray some disinfectant into our hands. The cruise line is very concerned that we do not catch any kind of disease. Inside the ship, we are shown to our cabins. The ship has 14 decks. Well, really it's 13 because of the superstitions about the 13th floor. Our bank of elevators was towards the rear of the ship, but there was another one at the front. I guess I shouldn't say front and rear, but rather bow and stern. And now, as for the cabins, our cabin was amazingly comfortable. Television, telephone, huge bed. They say it's queen size, but it feels like it's king size. And a bathroom with a tub, believe it or not. Everything really first class. Even large closets and plenty of drawers, and even space for the empty suitcases. We also had a large couch and a table. However, I have one complaint. They have a bottle of water and some soft drinks in the cabin. And now you would assume that they supply the water because they consider the tap water to be unsafe, right? Not so. You drink from that water and you incur some unexpected costs. Nice little racket that should be pointed out. We were warned by our friends who had been on a trip with this cruise line before and had received a hefty bill after the return home. And why don't they just add a few measly bucks to the trip instead? And here you see a couple of pictures of the formal dining room. Actually, there are two. One is downstairs and one is upstairs. The upstairs one is for guests on an assigned dining plan, and the one downstairs for the ones on an open plan. The difference is that the assigned plan requires you to take your meal at a specific time and at a specific table, while the open plan lets you eat any time during meal hours and to sit where the waiter will put you. The meals are absolutely first class and the service is incredible. An overabundance of super friendly wait personnel, and most of them seem to be Indonesian. One of the desserts is a baked Alaskan. Now, Helmut passed on the Alaskan when we ordered it and said he didn't want it, but when he saw ours, he was so taken by it that he asked the waiter to bring him one, and the waiter overdid it a little bit and brought him a whole plate full of it. So you can see it here. And this is the huge swimming pool on the Lido deck. Now, if you come from the stern and you get off at the 11th deck, you come to the area with a pool with a retractable cover. It's really odd. Since Lido is on the 11th deck, you can see the sky from the pool. And you will also find a jacuzzi and a children's pool. And next to the pools are tables and chairs. You can pick up something to eat from the self-serve restaurant and bring it out or have it brought out. Or you can go into the restaurant on the Lido deck and sit inside. The Lido restaurant is open virtually around the clock. Now we are leaving Tampa. And here are our two friends, Helmut and Inge, and Jutta and myself. This, by the way, is not our normal attire, but it is the custom on these ships to have a couple of formal dinners during the trip. This picture here was taken on the Lido deck and shows a crew member talking to a lady with a walker. We were intrigued by this lady because she seemed on very familiar terms with the crew, and we found out that she has spent a total of, believe it or not, 2,560 days on cruise ships of the Holland America line. Just divide that by 365 days a year, and you end up with over 7 years. It turns out that she has traveled like this for 13 years, on and off. She's called Mama Lou, and we saw her book the next trip. A lot better than a nursing home, don't you think? In her case, she probably pays in the neighborhood of $75 a day, and that includes meals and all the entertainment and a nice cabin. My hat is off to her. And here you can see a cruise ship of the Carnival line. We saw a lot of ships following more or less the same route. We are now on our way to Key West. Here you see the pier at Key West. Right now it's empty, but later on in the evening, or towards the evening, it's teeming with young acrobats. And they're doing hair-raising stunts on stilts. And we were shocked to see that they have neither nets nor mats or anything to catch them. And it's all concrete, and they're doing some hair-raising performances. Here's another look at our ship, and then when you walk downtown, and you can do that directly from the pier, the first impression is really tackiness. Here's Sloppy Joe's, a restaurant supposedly a favorite hangout of Ernest Hemingway. The sign says it all. On the street, you see lots of rickshaws, sometimes ridden by girls. And here's a young man selling dirty jokes for beer money. And here's a local tourist tram, and the tram is surprisingly expensive. You could actually call it a tourist trap rather than a tourist tram. And here's a man in a gold suit with a live rooster on his head, and a girl getting a tattoo, probably meant to shock her parents. However, the tattoo is fake and comes off within a couple of weeks. Here are many of the small vehicles for rent to tourists. And the southernmost point in the U.S. Hemingway House, a couple of pictures of it. The Truman Little White House. Now, you may know or may not know that Truman had an escape from Washington, and that was here in Key West, and he called this place the Little White House. There's a local museum of art and history with statues of everyday people, a shipwreck museum, and the Mel Fisher Museum. Now, Mel Fisher is the person who found a lot of the treasures in sunken ships around the area of Key West, and he actually managed to get that treasure, and some of it is displayed in the museum here. Now, here's Helmut with a newfound girlfriend, and I guess Inge figured what's good for the gander is good for the goose, so here she is with her boyfriend. This is a tourist sailing ship. It's actually a cruise ship, similar to what we're doing, except you got to work on this thing. You actually got to help run it. And then you see chickens just everywhere you look. There are chickens. And this goes back to the Hemingway days because he mentions it too. And here is the stern of our ship, and I think this might be the time to tell you a little bit about what's going on aboard. On board the ship there's a library where you can check out books and CDs and DVDs, and every cabin has a DVD player, of course. You can use the internet, but watch out. Here is the chart. You can see the rates. Wow, ouch. I mean, they have jigsaw puzzles, they have Sudoku contests, card games, you name it. In a lounge, they have a string quartet playing chamber music. 3 young women and a man from the Ukraine. Fantastic. Also a theater with first-class performances like magic tricks, etc. Then a movie theater with the latest films. An art auction where we saw a painting going for tens of thousands of dollars, as well as others for under $100. A regular shopping mall, various bars, different lounges with dance music, and it goes on and on. This hand spray dispenser can be found everywhere. The next day we arrive in Belize. To get into Belize, we had to use tenders, and this is what a typical tender looks like. We had planned the Lost World Canopy and Rappelling Tour. Unfortunately, though, when we were asked about my previous heart problems and when I had to admit to my bypass operation 11 years ago, I received the curt answer, "End of conversation. Next." No cajoling of any kind would change their minds, so we had to choose something else. And we decided on the Mangrove Tunnels and Museum Tour. Our guide was a young mestizo girl. They are of part European and part native Indian Mayan descent. She was very competent and showed us the mangroves, pointing out an iguana. You can see the yellow arrow pointing at it, a small crocodile, and various types of birds. I thought I'm going to let you see some pictures of the mangroves, and the pictures aren't all that exciting, and then I will show you how we arrived back in Belize, and I will also show you a series of pictures from the pyramids that our friends visited. And while you're looking at them, I'll play you some Mayan music, and this is today's Mayan music, and there are a lot of Mayans still around to this day.
Sokwen medyo shavala shachoganati Akhne shabi khata qatsu masokwen Abin ganta abin sokwesh ganta sokwen Kitsu qawlukwan fuqira
At the end, we saw an interesting museum, but to be honest, we would have preferred the rappelling tour. Arriving back in Belize, the trip to the Mayan palaces of Cahal Pech was undertaken by our friends, so I cannot take credit for this segment. Translation of Cahal Pech is place of the ticks, for what it's worth. These palaces were in use from 1000 to 600 BC. Now look at this profile. This was their Mayan guide. It's time for all aboard now, and next stop is Guatemala. We were able to pull up close at the port in Santo Tomas de Castilla. Getting off the ship, we found a tour guide, and we signed up for a bus tour with a young local girl. We saw a typical cemetery. Burial is always above ground because of the groundwater level. And this is a typical road outside the larger towns. Back in port, we saw a large building, and inside were vendors hawking handicrafts. Beautifully done things, and we looked at around, and then what did we see? Mama Lou all decked out among the locals, and a group of dancers in local costumes. And this particular picture, doesn't this group of women look like a painting? Strange. And here's a small group of locals decked out in their costumes performing a dance. Again, this time to Costa Maya in Mexico. We reached the settlement via a very long pier. The destination was a typical small resort, and it's probably owned by the shipping line. Grass umbrellas and a nice beach, a swimming pool, a shopping mall, local group playing music and dancing, performers strolling around, some pretty girls, and that was our last impression before returning to Tampa. We're back in Tampa now. But I will have to explain a couple of things. Number one, how does one pay on board ship? Before the cruise, let's say 3 weeks before, you request a special card and your cabin assignment. You then receive a kit in the mail with your room key, which also acts as a card, a credit card. It looks like a credit card, and it will open your cabin door, but it can also be used for all of your personal purchases on board. That is, any land excursions, purchases that you do in the shopping mall, etc. This is a very convenient way to avoid delays. You receive a final bill at the end, and if something should crop up later, like in this case, the water in the room, you will receive a final bill in the mail. Of course, the card is backed up by your assigned credit card. And number two, what about tipping? This has always been a problem. How much do I tip? Some lines supply you with an envelope and suggest that you leave a tip, and that obviously didn't work very well. A particular problem with open seating is that you have no head waiter. So this company came up with the idea to charge you a flat rate of $11 a day per person for tips. The company then assigns 75% to your cabin steward and distributes the balance among other key personnel. This is a very efficient way to handle this matter. If people object, they can go to the purser and request a change, but I doubt that many people will do that. Well, that's about it, except I should tell you about the ratio of passengers to personnel. Believe it or not, the ratio is almost 2 to 1. It's almost 1,200 passengers and 600 personnel. Now, that you can imagine leads to excellent service. And that's about it. And I can tell you this, I can highly recommend the Holland America line for its friendly and efficient service.